Israeli warplanes struck Yemen on Friday, with the power station, ports and residential area amongst the targets. The same day, Houthi forces say they attacked a US aircraft carrier and naval vessels in the Red Sea. What's the risk of further escalation? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Israel launched air raids across Yemen on Friday. The same day, Houthi fighters say they attacked US Navy targets in the Red Sea. Israel remains on high alert, warning it will hit Yemen again. The Houthis have targeted Israeli and commercial vessels in the Red Sea since early in Israel's war on Gaza, saying the attacks are in solidarity with the Palestinians. While most rockets and drones have been intercepted, there's been serious public alarm in Israel. So what are the risks of all of this? And what's the impact on Yemen's people after years of war and humanitarian crises? We'll talk to our guests shortly, but first, this report from Victoria Gatenby.
As tens of thousands of Yemenis joined a demonstration in Sanaa to show solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, Israeli airstrikes hit Houthi targets in the capital on Friday. Israeli state media referred to the attacks as a joint operation with the US and the UK. But the UK Ministry of Defence and US Central Command say they were not involved. The Israeli military also bombed the ports of Ras Isa and Hodeidah, saying it was in response to repeated Houthi attacks.
The Yemeni armed forces carried out several military operations in the past 48 hours, the most prominent of which was targeting the American aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman and a number of its warships in the northern Red Sea region, with a number of cruise missiles and drones.
For more than a year, the Iran-backed rebels have attacked commercial ships linked to Israel. Their actions in the Red Sea have disrupted global shipping routes and pushed up insurance costs. Israel says more strikes against the Houthis will follow.
Israel's long arm will reach you everywhere. Thousands of Houthis who participated in a hate march against Israel heard up close the power of the Air Force planes. The port of Hodeidah is paralyzed, and the port of Ras Isa is on fire, and the message is clear. Whoever harms Israel will be harmed twice.
For years, Yemen has been devastated by civil war and a dire humanitarian crisis. Attacks by Israel and its allies are causing increasing hardship for its people, but the Houthis say they won't back down.
The Yemenis here in this square and in hundreds of other squares across the free provinces stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. They are undeterred by any form of intimidation because what our people in Palestine are enduring is 1,000 times harsher than what nations in the Arab and Islamic world are experiencing.
The region's political landscape has changed dramatically in recent months. Israel's war on Gaza and its offensive in Lebanon, as well as the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, have weakened Iran's so-called axis of resistance, a network of groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis. But without a diplomatic resolution, the hostilities between long-time adversaries are unlikely to end anytime soon. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests. From Manama, we are joined by Mustapha Noman, a former Deputy Foreign Minister of Yemen. In Sanaa, Yousef Mawry, a political analyst and award-winning journalist, based in Yemen. And in London, Farea Al Muslimi, a research fellow at the Middle East and North Africa programme of the think tank Chatham House. He specialises in Yemen and the wider Gulf region. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to start in Sanaa first with Yousef Mawry. Yousef, this isn't a war the Houthis can win. This isn't a war the Israelis can win. So why is it being fought? What's the end game for the Houthis here?
Well, I think it's safe to say that Yemen today stands at a critical juncture. In the midst of the political maneuvering and the military operations conducted by Yemen's Ansarullah movement, you also have what is happening with the genocide that's taken place in Palestine. Yemen feels that it is an obligation. The Ansar Allah movement, also known as the Houthis, they feel it is a moral imperative to stand with the people of Palestine and bring an end to the genocide that's taken place in the midst of the chaos and the turmoil that's happening in the midst of the U.S.-Israeli airstrikes that are being conducted on Yemen. The Ansar Allah movement and the Yemeni armed forces, they feel that it is still an obligation to invoke international law, specifically the Genocide Convention, which obliges nations to act decisively, including taking up military actions to halt or stop genocide. Now, this military operation, this call to action from Yemen, is actually exposing the international community's obligation under international law. These military operations, siding with the Palestinians, are pointing the fingers at the U.S., Israel, the Western powers, who for almost a year and a half have enabled and allowed this genocide to continue. So, as I mentioned, the Yemeni people that you see taken to the streets, they feel it is not just a legal obligation to conduct military operations against Israel and against the shipping lanes that are being used by the Israeli regime to continue its genocide. They believe that this is an obligation of not just Yemen, but the international community. And unfortunately, the international community has failed to uphold the principles and the values that are in the, stipulated in the international law, stipulated in the doctrine, to the responsibility to protect doctrine, and also the Genocide Convention. This is a travesty.
Mustapha, the justification for this is putting pressure on the international community to do something. The Houthis are doing effectively war diplomacy. Is that an idea, an argument you have any sympathy with?
Unfortunately, I mean, the idea of supporting Gaza is it's an emotional idea. I mean, it's very emotional to the minds and hearts of in the Arab and Muslim world. Unfortunately, we all know that the machinery, the military machinery that the Houthi owns, is not capable of changing the equation in that region. Hezbollah has tried, and we saw what happened to them. The Palestinians themselves have suffered enormously. The genocide has not stopped. The Syrian military machinery has been, vanished in a couple of days. And the Houthis are geographically far away. The problem in this notion of supporting Gaza is that the leader of the Houthi group thinks and believes that he can be the heir of the death of Hassan Nasrallah and the vanishing of the Syrian regime. And we have seen what is happening in Gaza itself. So he believes that he can take over this leadership of this notion of liberating Palestine or supporting Gaza. But in fact, all what we have seen during the last few months, all what he has done is that he has brought attacks after attacks, either by the U.S. Military or the British, or lately by the Israeli military directly. So what gains have he made for the Gazans is zero, nothing. All what he has done is bringing a military attack on Yemen, destroying all the civilian infrastructure of the Yemeni people, which is, for me, it's inexplicable. Why are they attacking the port? They claim that they're attacking the port so that no military equipments come from Iran. There was a mechanism put by the UN in 2015, and it's total blockade on the Hodeidah port. They can just reinforce it again. They have just lifted that, and that gave the Houthi the means to get more arms from Iran at the time. I don't think they are doing it now, but at least for the last few years, they have been using this port to bring in military equipment from Iran or somewhere else. This is the whole complexity of the situation, that Houthis want to take Yemen hostage to a cause which we all believe in, but they cannot.
You've made several points there. You've made several points there, Mustapha. I want to come to London now, to Farea Al Muslimi. Zero gains have been brought against for the Palestinians by the Houthis. That's what Mustapha Noman has actually said. In fact, he said this is bad for Yemen, but it's not bad for the Houthis. However, they're on the world stage right now.
Yes, whether they make gains or whether they make actual support to the Palestinians or not is ultimately not something I believe that what keeps the Houthis awake at night of those attacks. Whether they make Israel change its behavior is also not the biggest concern they have. What they have out of a goal of the attacks in the Red Sea, but also in Israel, are number one, to project power globally and internationally, and in a way that was not possible before October 7. And this is a chance to them also, as Mustapha said, specifically after the fall of Syria and Hezbollah to a certain level. And the second goal of this is also a self-fulfilling prophecy of a narrative that they're actually in a war with Israel. And the third, and which also gives them a lot of passes domestically in issues that has to do with the peace process, that has to do with governance, and that has to do with many internal disputes. But also, obviously, the axis of resistance has been in different layers, the first line of defense for Iran. But when it comes to the Houthis specifically, I believe even whether Iran at the moment tells them to stop or not to stop attacks on Israel, I think they will continue to do that for obvious reasons. And this is something they have been very consistent about and very clear about. I don't think that what will be a tremendous difference is not an Israeli attacks on them or an American or a British, but no matter how much this seems repetitive, is actually a ceasefire and a deal in Gaza. That will be the only thing that will neutralize the Houthis. Otherwise, yes, the recent airstrikes has not been against the Houthis. They has been against infrastructure in Yemen. And like in Israel, in Lebanon or in Gaza, Israel has been very cruel. It's a very rare that you see a minister of defense bragging about a war crime, which is destroying a civilian boat, which has not the military tool. And this has been something, obviously, they are more reckless about. It's also why, if their claims that the recent attacks were coordinated with the US and the UK is correct, is extremely new precedent and dangerous. The CENTCOM entire idea was
You're making a lot of good points there, but I want to bring in our guest in Sanaa, Yousef Mawry. Now, Yousef, there is a danger here that the conflict could escalate because Britain gets involved, because the Americans get involved. And that is a different kind of war that you are then fighting. Yemen is already the most difficult international humanitarian crisis. It's already economically de-developing. It's going backwards. Yemen can't afford this as a whole. And there is a danger that you could bring the whole country into a wreck by keeping this up, and you're not getting anything from it.
Well, I think there's a bigger danger that's represented in allowing the genocide to continue in Palestine. You know, I simply just don't understand some of the comments made by some of your guests. On one hand, they're saying that the Ansar Allah movement, the Houthis, are waging this war against, the three of the world's most powerful nations, Israel, America, and the British Army, the British government, and along with the entire West, because they want to remain in power in Yemen. I think history would show you that if you want to stay in power, you don't raise arms against the US and Israel. Look at Saddam Hussein, look at Gaddafi, look at what happened in Afghanistan. 2 million Muslims have been killed by the long arm of US military intervention in the Muslim world. History has shown us that it is the US who decides who gets to stay in power and who gets to be toppled, like Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. But this is the narrative that the Ansar Allah movement is challenging. All for the goal of preserving humanity, according to them, preserving and upholding international law, the Genocide Convention, Article 1 and Article 2 of the responsibility to protect doctrine. Why are we not throwing the book here? Why are we not, extolling the virtues of international law when it comes to the genocide that's being perpetrated against the Palestinian? Why is this something that could be brushed off as a political aspiration or a political goal that the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen is using as a stepping stone just to remain in power? I'll tell you what, I'll tell your guest this, because your first guest, he mentioned that they're using this just to remain in power and to just remain on the world stage. The U.S. officials have actually contacted the leadership of the Ansarullah Houthis. They told them that they will recognize the United States, the international community is willing to recognize the Ansarullah-backed Houthi government as the legit authority, as the legit government in Yemen. The one condition and the one compromise is that they stop their military operations in support of Palestine, right? And this is a fact. This is what the U.S. called on the Ansarullah movement to abide by, and they will recognize them, and they will protect their rulership in power. So there's a contradiction there.
What's your reaction to what Yousef has just said?
Well, it's sarcastic, because if you want to support Gaza, you don't inflict your people inside to dangers and to harassment and to imprison them and taking them hostage to your policies. The Houthis have not been elected. They have not been chosen by the people to govern this country. So what they are doing now is they are diverting the attention of the Yemeni people towards Gaza, which we all believe in the cause in Gaza. But I would have liked and loved to believe what Yousef is saying from Sanaa, had the Houthis been kinder to the people who are living there. But all what they are doing is just trying to promote their image, promote their cause by attacking Israel and the occupied territories in Israel. But what have they been doing inside Yemen? I mean, this is contradictory. I mean, you cannot go and attack a country to say that you want to save the people in Gaza, while you're not doing anything to save the people inside the country. So this is contradictory. Secondly, what the Houthis are doing has not helped the Palestinians. I will keep repeating this. What has it done to the people in Gaza? I mean, saying or praise or just like flattering themselves that the Americans have given them offers or the British have given them offers. Nobody has heard this, but through the Houthi media. I mean, I don't believe this. I mean, it looks to me like a farce. It's not serious. I mean, they have been attacked because they have been attacking Israel. Fine, but what have they done there? What is the damage that was caused to Israel, or what has it helped the people in Gaza?
Mustapha, I want to bring in Farea Al Muslimi here as well. There is a political side to all of this. Yousef touched on it. You know, the Houthis are trying to push for a political solution to this. They're doing this through like airstrikes and through attacks on vessels in the Red Sea. But there seems to be, if you take the Houthis at full face value, there seems to be a political element to this. Is there some pressure that the Houthis can put on that it isn't attacks, that is diplomatic? Or do they not have any choice?
I think there is a political element in this, though a little bit separate, which is the Houthis and also Iran are trying their best to stop what seems like an inevitable normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel the last year. This is another political element of it that's beyond even the political element of Palestine. But let me just say something, which Yemen has been going through a war for the last 10 years, perhaps a little bit more. And for most of the last 8 years, this war has been a civil war with a little bit of a proxy war. At the moment, with these attacks, despite the political narrative, what they have done is they have put Yemen into the heart of a regional direct war, and it has made Yemen war a regional. I'm not sure how much of it by now remains a domestic aspect, the Yemen war, but all what we can hope for is, if at least this conflict has become regional, is to make it not further international, which means to try to avoid having the Chinese and the Russians more involved in those attacks, which, if things continue, I think will be a matter of time, especially with the collapse of Assad in Syria, where you see Russia more involved in direct or in indirect ways, in a different ways, and obviously China trying to project power in the Red Sea in a different formats. That's the upcoming danger that will go beyond Yemen, will go beyond, I think, the Gulf, and will go beyond the Middle East. And that's right now what Yemen poses if this continues to go forward.
Yousef, I want to bring you in here. One of the fears is, and I wanted to talk about this, and Farea has just mentioned it, is the fact that Russia and China could well get involved on the side of the Ansar Allah movement, the government backed by the Houthi government, in effect. And then the Western powers have to get involved and Yemeni people become the victims. It becomes a proxy war that destroys an already destroyed country. And that is dangerous, is it not?
Well, first of all, Yemen, if you want to talk about the country's infrastructure being destroyed, it was destroyed because of countries like the U.S. and the West who sponsored the Saudi-led coalition war from 2015 to 2021, which destroyed Yemen's infrastructure and exposed the Yemeni people to the world's worst humanitarian catastrophe. So why are we now all of a sudden invoking, the suffering people in Yemen when Yemen is standing against the bloodshed and the massacres taking place in Palestine? Where was this voice and where was all this energy in almost 9 years of bombardment from from 17 of the world's regional most powerful nations who bombed Yemen, bombed every public road, every bridge, every power plant, every fuel and diesel facility. This wasn't something that was discussed. The suffering of the Yemeni people was not the concern of the international community, but I think, there's a hypocrisy and a double standard when we're talking about the suffering of the Yemeni people now and linking it between the military operations taking place, the military operations in support of Palestine in order to pressure the Israeli regime to end the genocide once and for all. So, let's separate between the two. Yes, Yemen, there is a humanitarian situation here in Yemen. The humanitarian situation is caused by the 9 years of a blockade that was caused by the Saudi-led coalition and its Western partners who, as I mentioned, destroyed the nation's infrastructure. And now separating to the military operations, these are separate military operations that only started once the genocide in Palestine began. And like I said, and I'll repeat it again for the third time, it's in accordance to international law. So if we want to abide by international law, then it becomes the obligation of the United States, regional nations, the West as a whole, Iran, Russia, China, they all should step in militarily in order to bring an end to the bloodshed taking place in Palestine.
Mustapha, Yousef makes a very good point. No one really did care about Yemen for a long time, but they do care now. People are talking about Yemen now. That has to be a positive outcome, surely.
I don't want to go back in history why we have been into war in 2015. And I am one of, and Farea is, who opposed this war since day one. This is facts and it's all public. Now, and this war has come to a halt at least in 2019. Now, nothing happened afterwards. No major wars, no major attacks have targeted Yemen. I'm talking about what about from 2019 until 2023 when what's called the flood of Gaza has started. What has happened in Yemen? I mean, the Houthis have taken the Yemeni people into like a hostage, and they are using the Yemeni infrastructure just to impose whatever they think about, supporting Gaza. And I will go back again. What gains have the Houthis provided to the people in Gaza? Nothing, zero. I mean, if they flatter about the sirens in Tel Aviv or in other cities in Israel, this is not a win. It's just a PR. But the damage to the Yemenis have been much, much more price that they paid.
Mustapha, let's broaden this out. I want to bring in Farea here. Farea, the axis of resistance, Hamas, Hezbollah, etc., has been damaged. You touched upon this earlier. Iran's role has completely changed since October the 7th, 2023. It's much more of a perhaps weaker state than it is now. And if that is the case, and I'm asking you that question, what does that mean for Yemen?
I think, yes, the axis of resistance is now in a defense mode. I think it's posed in Syria, even though if another element will find a new role there, which is Hamas. It's humiliated in Lebanon, and I think that's obviously a new fact in the ground. But it will be a lot of illusion and wishful thinking to say it's over. I do think right now, obviously, groups like the militias in Iraq are keeping their heads down, and that's obviously also according to even Iranian requests. But the Houthis own their own head in that regard. So they definitely are having a more frontline position, and that obviously will affect Yemen. Let me just say that also, no matter how far this goes or how long it goes, in the long term, Yemen will continue to pay a price for this. And I think we have to be aware that unless there is a new push for, and we have to be aware that the illusion of the Israelis or the Americans or the Saudis or anyone external eliminating an internal group by force in Yemen is something totally incorrect, and it's something that is not going to happen. What's happening right now, and it has happened the last 8 years, is Yemen's infrastructure are being destroyed, and the groups like the Houthis continue to thrive in a war, and there isn't even a possible Syrian solution for Yemen. Probably the other way around, if we see that scenario in which the government forces fail totally in the eyes of the Houthis because they are poorly led, they are corrupted, and they are blocked by the lack of leadership. So,
okay, sorry, we are running out of time. I just very quickly, Yousef. Very quickly, Yousef, I just want to ask you this simple question. If Iran tells the Houthi government to stop, will they stop?
Of course not. No country has really any influence militarily on the Ansar Allah Houthis. Even Iran. I don't think even Iran was expecting that the Ansar Allah movement would be this serious about taking the fight to Israel, essentially declaring war, not just on Israel, but the U.S. and the West as a whole, because this is exactly what it is. It's a war on Yemen. The Western powers have aligned along with Israel to conduct attacks on Yemen, and Yemen is willing to take the fight to them, backed by the Ansar Allah Houthis. Iran, I don't think they would be very, very serious in actually joining alliance with the Ansar Allah movement to go to war with the West and Israel. I think Yemen is sort of on this front by itself. They're at the vanguard. They're the ones leading this military offensive against Israeli shipments in the Red Sea, Israeli targets across occupied Palestine, and U.S. warships, including the USS Truman aircraft carrier and the U.S. Eisenhower, which were targeted by Yemen's armed forces a number of times. And according to the Ansar Allah Houthi leader, he's mentioning that the U.S. is ashamed and humiliated and embarrassed by the fact that they don't have a solution.
Sorry, Yousef, we are actually out of time now. So I want to thank all our guests, Mustapha Noman, Yousef Mawry and Farea Al Muslimi. And thank you too for watching. Now you can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.